In today's episode of Today in World War II, the Soviets besiege a very key town in Finland on the Karelian Peninsula. The British governor of Hong Kong officially surrenders to the Japanese invasion force. Chester Nimitz arrives in Pearl Harbor to take over the Pacific Fleet. The Germans in Stalingrad slaughter 12,000 horses. It's the last meat they're going to get in their lives. And finally, the United States stops the German Second Panic Division just 4 miles away from the Meuse River, which was the main barrier to the Germans taking Antwerp in the Battle of the Bulge. Let's get started. Okay, so we're going to continue focusing on the Winter War in between the Soviet Union and Finland. On today's day, Christmas Day, the Red Army resumed attacking the Taipale sector in Finland. If you can imagine a map of the Karelian Peninsula, if you're on the Soviet side, on the right hand side of the peninsula bordering Lake Ladoga, there is a small Finnish town called Taipale. This this town would end up being besieged by the Red Army, and it endured one of the longest and heaviest artillery daily bombardments in the war, not just the Winter War, but in the entire war. So this was the first time that the Red Army really made a push to take Taipale. The Finns were able, they were the Soviets were able took advantage of the Suvanto River that was frozen and they could get across easily because of the weather. They initially established three bridgeheads, but the Finns were able to use their artillery and destroy two of them. But the Red Army still had one bridgehead that did survive. I'm going to foreshadow this a little bit, like I said, because Taipale is a very famous city in Finnish history in the sense that the defenders' heroism was a symbol of an inspiration for them, and they held out almost the entire time of the war. Now the war ended up, they declared an armistice, and spoiler alert, in March, but almost that time they were able to hold out against overwhelming odds against the Red Army. So this was the first major attempt to besiege Taipale by the Red Army on Christmas Day. I hope that I don't have to besiege you to get you to click on the subscribe button and hit the bell to make sure you get notified whenever I drop another video. It's a very small thing on your part. It means a lot to me, so I hope you can do me a solid on that. Thanks. Very sad Christmas Day in 1941. The British governor of Hong Kong, Sir Mark Young, and the commanders of the Allied forces, British forces in Hong Kong, General Maltby, they ordered the final surrender of the colony to the Japanese. And I've already related the barbaric behavior of the Japanese invasion force. Um, I'm not going to go into more detail about that. That's just rehashing, old wounds, I suppose you want to call it that. I've described it enough. So it's noteworthy on a strategic and a macro point of view if we zoom out a little bit here. So the Japanese they attacked Pearl Harbor on the 7th. They started the offensive into Asia. So by now, Wake Island had fallen in the Central Pacific. Hong Kong has now fallen. And so the Philippines have been invaded. So you've got that's moving forward. The Japanese are making steady progress in Malaysia on their way to take Singapore, and the Japanese had already invaded Borneo and Dutch East Indies, which is now called Indonesia. So they're on schedule. They're making extremely quick progress in their invasion. And just to take your mind back to a previous episode when I talked about what Yamamoto, the head of the Japanese Navy, had said that they would run rampant. They would have great victories for 6 months, and then after that, they would start running into difficulties if they did not decapitate the American carriers, American fleet at Pearl Harbor, which they did not. And look, as we move forward in this study, we're going to see that Yamamoto was very prophetic, and it pretty much followed the course of the war. Pretty much followed what he predicted. Okay, and then speaking of the Pacific War, on this day, Christmas Day, 1941, saw the arrival of the United States Admiral Chester Nimitz at Pearl Harbor. He was not officially given the assignment of commander of the Pacific Fleet. That would happen in a couple of days, but he arrived in Pearl Harbor, and moving forward, that is a hugely important event. Uh, the American High Command in Washington, D.C., Admiral King was the head of the Navy. He made a very good call to have Nimitz be the head of the Pacific Fleet for the duration of the war, because he was like a breath of fresh air. When after Pearl Harbor and losing Wake Island, the U.S. fleet, the U.S. forces in Hawaii were very demoralized and depressed. And he came in and was like a new broom sweeping, and he did a great job. And we'll get into the steps he took. They were mostly morale builders while they were getting ready and getting their strength up. And as we'll see soon, as early as May of 1942, they were going toe to toe with the Japanese in their aircraft carriers. So he did a fantastic job. From day one, and so it was great that he took over, or at least he arrived to take over the Pacific Fleet on Christmas 1941. Uh, a completely different Christmas, though, on December 25th, 1942, for the Germans at Stalingrad. As I told you in previous episodes, they had been encircled by the Red Army. The Hitler had refused permission for them to try to fight their way out. He had refused Field Marshal von Manstein, pleadings to try to break through on their side, have a joint attack from both sides to break the encirclement. He ordered them to stand and fight to the last man. So they were able to get the Germans were able to get a little bit of a Christmas dinner, because they had 12,000 horses that they were using. Obviously, they didn't have, this was not the American army, with trucks, and a completely mobile army. They used horsepower a lot. They had 12,000 horses, and they slaughtered them all. And so this was the last meat ration they were to get for most of them the rest of their lives, because the ones that, spoiler alert, the ones that were taken prisoner, I guarantee you when they were in Gulag, they weren't getting no meat from the Soviets, that's for sure. So I hope they enjoyed their meat, their last ration of meat, albeit horse meat. And finally, on December 25th, 1944, back to the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans, as I told you previously, the thrust of their attack was to go through the Ardennes forest, break out, cross the Meuse River, and then go forward to take Antwerp, which was the main harbor. The harbor that had all the supplies and the troops and the gas, the munitions were coming into to supply the Allied armies, British, Canadian, and American, and the French. So it was a pretty dicey thing there for to begin with. They made some great progress at the beginning, and this was the United States Second Armored Division, with some British help, did stop the main thrust of one of the main thrusts, I guess the southern thrust of the German offensive. They stopped the German Second Panzer Division just 4 miles away from the Meuse River in Belgium. This was the high water mark of the German offensive. They kept attacking Bastogne. They kept trying to move forward, but this was the high. This is the farthest they got, and at this point in time, it was going to be a slow process of driving them back out, to flatten that bulge, as it were. So I want to thank you for watching today's video. I love doing these things for you, and I can't wait for you to watch tomorrow's video as well.